Hello and welcome to another episode of the Law City Uncut podcast. It's our first episode of 2025, so I know you want to know what Law City is up to in 2025. I'll give you two things. We've got the Law City internship where we've got interns from Oxford, Cambridge, LSE, University of Warwick and University of Birmingham, and they're with us for the whole year, helping us on various Law City initiatives. We've also got the Dream Fund, where we're hoping to support aspiring lawyers from low socioeconomic backgrounds who want to go to Russell Group universities, Ivy League universities, but do not have the financial backing to do so. We're basically making their dreams a reality, hence the name Dream Fund. But enough of that. Today, I sit down with Alison Eddy, a partner at Irwin Mitchell and a leader in the legal world. Although she comes from a low-income family, Alison has been at the top of her game for decades and has become a prominent name in the medical negligence world. From being one of the founding partners of the London office in 1995 to managing partner, Alison's work over the years has won her several awards, including most recently the Legal 500 ESG Lifetime Achievement Award for Women in Law. I want to explore her inspiring journey from her early days to becoming a leader in her field. We'll delve into her challenges, the milestones she's achieved, whether you're an aspiring lawyer or a junior lawyer looking at how to transition from junior positions to leadership positions, or just simply intrigued about the stories of influential people, this episode is for you. Hello, Alison. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
It's great to have you with us here today, and I'm excited to get into this conversation. Right, so you've been at Irwin Mitchell for over 25 years. You were one of the founding partners of the London office. You also led the medical negligence practice.
Yeah,
I believe you were first in your family to go to university as well.
I was.
Amazing. Well, take us right back to the start. What was it like growing up Alison Eddy, and what prepared you for all of this?
Okay, so yes, I was born and brought up in Cardiff, in South Wales, and I'm from a low-income family. We weren't poor, but we didn't have any money. There's a difference. Yeah. And I wanted a different life to my parents. I saw that it's a real struggle not having any money. I also had a really strong sense of social justice, I think from when I was really young. So I spent some time working in a law centre in Cardiff, in a socially disadvantaged area. And I also worked in a women's refuge for a bit. And yes, as you say, I was the first in my family to go to university. And I went to university on a full grant, which was, just fantastic in those days. And in fact, the local education authority also paid for my conversion course. So I was incredibly fortunate.
Yeah.
And I went to university, got married in my first year.
Oh, wow. But what prepared you for becoming managing partner and gaining so many leadership positions? Were you prepared? Did your upbringing,
No, I don't think my upbringing really prepared me for that. What happened is I went to university. I decided to go into law because I felt that law could make a difference. That was the big thing for me. I know it sounds trite, but making a difference really mattered to me.
Yeah.
And so initially I could have gone to work in a law centre, because at that time we still had a lot of law centres. Of course, we hardly have any law centres at all anymore, if any. But I decided to go and work for a trade union firm. And so I was I was an employment lawyer, specialising in sex discrimination, equal pay for work of equal value. The Sex Discrimination Act and Equal Pay Act had only come into force in the 1970s.
Right.
So to be an employment lawyer in the 1980s was really exciting. It's a time when you're really pushing boundaries. So I really enjoyed that. But what then happened is trade unions, they probably still do this, but they used to have a free legal advice scheme for their members, so they could write in about anything. And increasingly, there were inquiries about medical negligence.
Okay.
And so I remember two cases stand out. One for a baby who'd been brain damaged as a result of of medical negligence at birth, and another case for a woman who suffered catastrophic brain injury when she was given the wrong anaesthesia. She was an epileptic. She was given the wrong anaesthesia for somebody suffering epilepsy during a cesarean section. And those cases had a big impact on me. And increasingly, I was seeing these medical negligence cases coming in, and I said, any that come in, I will take them, because I was, I just had a real interest in them. And this was a time when actually medical negligence is big business now. In our London office alone, we've got 80 colleagues in our medical negligence team of Irwin Mitchell. At that time, very few people were pursuing medical negligence cases. But anyway, I got into it. And for a while, I was handling medical negligence cases alongside the employment work. But then what happened is I was invited to set up a London office for Irwin Mitchell in 1995. And at that point, I jettisoned the employment part of my practice and just concentrated on the medical negligence. But, just thinking back, initially, when I was handling medical negligence cases, there was huge deference still shown to doctors in a way that there isn't now. People often go off and Google, get second opinions. In those days, there was huge deference to doctors, and also doctors didn't like criticising doctors. So people were just not so aware of their rights when things went wrong. I think they were more accepting of it and didn't seek out answers and seek out compensation the same way they do now.
So how has your role, I know you don't do practice medical negligence anymore, but how did your role evolve as people became more aware and medical negligence became a lot more popular? Is there anything that you realised was a bit different in the way you provided legal advice?
Well, so after I joined Irwin Mitchell in 1995, a long time ago, and the world was a very different place now. When I had 5 children when I joined, it was. I'll talk about this perhaps a bit later, but I really think it's really important during our careers to grasp opportunities.
Yeah.
Joining Irwin Mitchell was an amazing opportunity, and I think the way our careers evolve is sort of serendipity. I happened to meet this partner who led the personal injury team at Irwin Mitchell. I was at a medical negligence conference, and it was a fantastic opportunity. But as I say, I had 5 children aged between 3 and 11. It was not great timing, but I really think, well, I look back and I think, I don't really know how I did it at that time either, to be honest. So it wasn't great timing, because I was having to, and 2 other partners came from the trade union firm. I took 2 other partners with me to set up this London office for Irwin Mitchell. So it was just 3 partners and 1 secretary. In London office alone now, we're 450 colleagues and 60 partners. So anyway, so at that time, there was no IT. We didn't just not have a computer on our desk. We didn't have mobile phones, of course, no laptops, and so nobody talked about well-being or D&I or any of these things. It was a completely different world.
Yeah.
And I was having to go out with my 2 other partners to bring the work in, to do the work, to build a team, to raise a young family. So yeah, it was hard. But we've grown very quickly, as I say. So now we're now a very substantial sized office, and medical negligence just, I don't know, people just became much more aware of their rights, and I started to specialise in cases where a baby had been brain damaged as a result of birth. That's mostly what I've done during my career, and those cases are, devastating, of course, for the families. The work for a medical negligence lawyer is incredibly rewarding because you can get accommodation, you can get the right accommodation put in place buy the right property, you can get care in place, you can get therapies in place. So the family will know that their child is going to be cared for in the right environment for as long as that child lives. And that's what matters to families. Having said that, families also want answers to what went wrong. And they want to know that what will they hope that lessons will be learned, and what happened to their child is not going to happen to another family. So that's a key motivator for parents, I think, in bringing medical negligence cases. But although it's a really rewarding area of law, it is also frustrating, because we do see the same mistakes being made time and time again.
Yeah. So that leads me on to my next question, actually. When I think about medical negligence, it's incredibly complex, but it's also very emotionally challenging. Is there a case that has had a profound impact on you, the way you think, how you see the world, and just your career in general?
Well, there have been so many. But one case that stands out for me is, I don't know, it's probably about 15, 16 years ago now. Maybe longer, but it was for a baby who suffered, again, catastrophic brain injury. And it was as a result of the mum had been discharged from hospital before the baby was feeding properly. So the baby wasn't latching on to the breast, so the mum and baby were discharged very quickly within birth, like within 24 hours of birth. And the baby just wasn't latching on properly. And so this baby suffered hypoglycemia and as a result suffered catastrophic brain injury. Now, when this client first approached me about this case, I thought, is this even a thing? Could this be real? And then we got expert evidence, because medical negligence cases were totally dependent on experts giving us advice on whether there has been a breach of duty, negligence, and causation, because medical negligence, we have to prove both negligence and we have to prove that that's what's caused the injury. Anyway, we got our expert evidence, and yes, it's breach of duty. This mum shouldn't have been discharged, and that was the cause of the injury. And it really stands out for me, I suppose, because I tell anybody, anybody I know who's got a child now having their own children, or my own children, I just say, nobody must ever be discharged from hospital until you know that the baby is feeding properly. When I was young, we were in hospital for a week after having a baby. Now you're lucky if you're in hospital for 24 hours. And so it's become, these sorts of cases have become much more common. Become much more common. And how scary is that? But also, the other interesting thing about the case, I think, is that it's where two worlds collide, human rights and medical negligence, because I think you might know I'm doing some work with the Girls' Human Rights Hub, and so obviously I'm interested in human rights, and I think that we with Mitchell, because we've got so many birth injury cases. In fact, at the moment, I think we've got 500 birth injury cases where either the baby's injured or the mum's injured, or very sadly, the baby might have died. But it's important to us that we use our experience to be able to work with policymakers, to be able to work with charities, to be able to raise awareness and drive meaningful change. And recently we put on the first South Asian conference, actually, first South Asian maternal conference, where we had 200 people in the room, again, policymakers, charities, talking about raising awareness, making improvements in maternity care. And the reason I raise it is because one of the key barriers that's been identified is language problems. And with this particular case I'm talking about, English wasn't the mum's first language.
Wow.
So.
How do you balance the emotional element, though? Because that sounds like a lot of responsibility on you as well. How do you make sure that you're not allowing emotions to impact your advice? Because I'm sure things go wrong sometimes. You might not get the right answer or the answer that you want. So how do you balance that side of your job?
Yeah, it is really difficult, because you're dealing with a family who have gone into hospital expecting to come out with with a healthy baby, and their lives are changed forever. So it is really hard, and I worry a bit that families are not going to get the answers that they want. So whenever I've spoken to families at a very early stage, I've said, I've explained that we are dependent on expert medical evidence. But of course, if the expert evidence comes back that in this particular case there wasn't anything that could have been done, there isn't any negligence, or there was negligence but it isn't what's caused the injury, then unfortunately, they're not going to get compensation to help their child. But on the other hand, they will have been through that process and they will know. So there's something quite cathartic, I think. And, just in knowing that you have explored whether anything went wrong, and you can be satisfied that nothing did.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So it's about managing expectations, but also
very
making
much
sure that you've done a thorough job and they understand that you've done everything that you could have possibly done.
Yeah, absolutely. So often, we'll be in a situation where we can't pursue a claim because the expert evidence doesn't support a claim, but the families will still thank us. Because they'll feel that, that they've invested. Because otherwise they go through their lives wondering if there was anything they could have done differently. And one of the saddest things about birth injury cases is that parents often feel guilty. They often feel, if only, I knew something wasn't right. Why didn't I shout out? Why didn't I say to the midwife, you've got to call a doctor now? So it assuages that guilt if we can get answers as well.
That's great. You've risen through the ranks into various leadership roles. I know you've been managing partner of the London office. What advice would you give to junior lawyers on what skills they can develop early on to transition successfully into leadership positions?
Oh, right. Okay. So I think junior lawyers, you need some talent. Bit of talent helps, and you're going to need some luck probably. But I think more than anything, what's critical is having self-belief and working hard. I think law is hard. I think it's a fabulous career. I have 5 children, as I said. Only one of them's gone into law, which I find surprising because I think it is a really rewarding career, and I'm surprised more of them didn't see that. But you're going to have to work hard, but you need to believe in yourself. I think self-belief will get you a long way. And, and if you're going to dream big, then you're going to fail sometimes because you're going to, stretch yourself a bit beyond where you're ready, perhaps at the moment. So you need to learn how to fail. So you need to build resilience. I think it's good to look out for role models, people that you aspire to be, watch how they behave, how they speak, how they, and I'm not saying really imitate them, try to be them, but just, you can learn some lessons from them, but you need to, remain true to your, to what's unique to you, to your authentic self, of course, as well. And I also think you do need to grasp opportunities. As I said, the opportunity to join Irwin Mitchell wasn't the best timing for me, really, but I just think you have to grasp opportunities, and there. But I think the important thing really is, just believe that regardless of your gender or, your colour or your sexuality or where you've come from, you deserve a place in that room. And I think you need to believe in that and seek help. People want to help young lawyers.
I agree with that. I think failure is all part of you becoming who you're meant to be. Did you always have self-belief, or did that develop over time?
Did I always have self-belief? Do I think I did, if I'm honest. And people talk a lot about imposter syndrome. I'm not going to talk about imposter syndrome. I don't like the term imposter syndrome at all. Because why? Because I think unless we're supremely arrogant, then we all find ourselves in situations where we think, how did I find myself here? Or why did I agree to this? It's completely out of my comfort zone. But you need to stretch yourself. And we talk about imposter syndrome in relation to women, and I think it applies equally to men. I think I think we all suffer from crisis of confidence from time to time. I just think you need to do things that scare you a bit. The first time you speak in public, think, I can't do this. I might be sick. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to send an excuse and say I can't be there today. But once you've done it and it's got, and what's the worst that can happen?
Honestly, you're not going to die.
So have I always had self-belief? Yes, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been situations where I thought, oh gosh, maybe. In fact, I'm going to give you an example because I was asked by the Girls' Human Rights very recently to speak at they had a symposium, a young lawyer symposium at the Supreme Court, and I find it very hard to say no. It's really important to say no. There's a real power in saying no, but I'm terrible at saying no. And so I immediately said yes and thought, this is going to be a great thing to do. And then I was preparing for it. I thought, I'm not a human rights lawyer. What exactly am I going to talk about? So I actually ran the lovely woman who runs Girls Human Rights Sub, Sultana Tafida KC, and I said, Sultana, I'm not a human rights lawyer. I'm really wondering what I'm going to talk about and whether I'm the best speaker for you. And she said, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Just come along, say something inspirational. It'll all be fine. And then I really thought about it, and I thought, yeah, of course I can do this. I can just talk about all, as I've just told you, I can talk about the work we've done in maternity care. And, and there are so many health inequalities in maternity care, 2.8 times as many black women die after childcare, 1.7 as many Southeast Asian, etc. And then I remembered the case that I've just mentioned to you about, the baby that wasn't feeding properly. And I thought, and she didn't speak English. So actually, that's a great case, because, it's a basic human right. You ought to, there shouldn't be a language problem for a woman who's giving birth. So anyway, so I brought all that together. But there was a moment where I thought, I'm going to be found out here, particularly because the other three on the panel, there was an Oxford human rights professor, and the other two panelists were definitely, their world was human rights. But anyway, but it was, as I say, it was fine. What's the word? I think it did go well.
I'm sure it did.
But actually, what's the worst that can happen? So I do think we need to stretch. We need to stretch ourselves. So that's a question about young lawyers. Yeah,
and also if you're not feeling a sense of fear, you're probably not doing anything new. You're probably sticking to your comfort zone. So a bit of fear is always healthy.
Yeah, well, I think you're not going to. I think when you're looking at the next role, then the next step up, I think it's good if you can visualize yourself in that role, visualize yourself doing that role. And, the chances are, I think with a lot of people, they're actually already doing that step up, but they don't see that. So I think it's having that confidence to advocate for yourself as well. People, I think sometimes they don't. I don't think they have the confidence to advocate for themselves in the way they need to.
Yeah, definitely comes over time. But you're now the new partner ambassador for inclusion.
I am.
What motivated that transition, and what does that role entail?
Okay, so I was the London managing partner for 12 years, and so I was that. It was in tandem with being a medical negligence lawyer. And actually, I was leading medical negligence for a long time, but I handed that role over about 4 years ago, maybe. And so more recently, I've been focusing very much on the managing partner role, which is largely an ambassadorial engagement role. And, I've been doing it a long time. And the thing is, if you don't have any major health crises, you're not terribly aware of just getting older, I think. But it got to a point where I thought, actually, I need to reduce my hours a bit. It's definitely time that I handed this over for succession planning. Somebody else needs to do it. So I would have handed this role over. I would have stepped down and handed it over a little while ago. But then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic did not feel to me like the right time to be handing over to somebody else, because our colleagues needed a lot of support. I was acutely aware during the pandemic of how privileged I am. I have a house. My kids are all left home, so we have a house with a garden, and it was all completely fine. And I could just see on Teams calls how colleagues were working. Some of them, they had a whole group round a table in the kitchen because they were flat sharing, or they were on a laptop in their parents' bedroom, or they were homeschooling. Or had no outdoor space. And some people were really struggling with that. So I really felt I needed to step up in a leadership role at that time, really leading with, empathy, compassion, injecting a bit of humour. I used to tell people about, dancing around the kitchen to Springsteen, that kind of thing. Anything that was kind of bring some joy into my life during that period. So, anyway, it did not feel like the right time. But this absolutely feels like the right time. We're out of the pandemic. We're about to move into a new office. So we've got a really lovely new office. It's a historic building, Art Deco building. It's called the Northcliffe in Tudor Street. So we're moving there in May. And so last autumn absolutely felt like the right time to hand over. And we've got a fantastic managing partner who's come my place, Deborah Casali, who's an employment partner. So the new role, it's a new title. I mean, my passion has always been diversity and inclusion. I've been an advocate for women, for women's rights, women in law, women in health, beyond that. So diversity and inclusion is something that I'm really passionate about. And I think, I know there's a lot of noise around at the moment about DEI, and I don't know what we'll call it in the future, but the reality is, we need it.
Changes all the time, and it's like,
of course,
it's definitely needed though.
It's needed, it's needed more than ever. And I think we need, workplace culture is really important. Workplace culture is a key differentiator for attracting and retaining top talent. So, very soon we're going to have 5 generations at work, and we all have, different beliefs and priorities and life experiences. So I think we need to be, respectful of each other. We need to acknowledge what our strengths are and what we can learn from each other. So I think diversity and inclusion in the ambassadorial role is very important. But also, externally, my role involves working with other organisations to share best practice on how we can improve diversity and inclusion. For women, just concentrating on women a moment, I love collaborating with other organisations on how we can support women at work, in law, but also in business beyond law. Collaborating, sharing stories, celebrating women. But of course, it isn't only about women. So as a profession, we definitely need to attract and retain more black lawyers. I used to hate the acronym BAME, and actually, certainly at Irwin Mitchell, I think South Asian lawyers are very well represented, and representation, of course, is important. But as a profession, we're not attracting enough black lawyers in. So, and lawyers from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So we're working with some organisations, like we work with Prime. I don't know, do you know Prime? Prime is an alliance of law firms that offers work placements to students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to bring them into law. And last year we offered 54 placements, work placements across 8 of our offices. So I think that's amazing.
Looks like you're heading in the right direction. And this platform, as you know, has a target audience of aspiring lawyers from low socioeconomic backgrounds. So hopefully they hear a bit about Irwin Mitchell and they apply for whatever opportunities you have available. But you've clearly done a lot in the diversity and inclusion space, particularly for women. Why do you think there are still so few women in leadership positions within the legal industry?
Well, I think you need real buy-in from senior management to bring, that we haven't got enough women in senior leadership roles. What are we going to do about that? And Irwin Mitchell, we made a decision that we had to do something about that. So what are the barriers? So I think law firms, businesses need to interrogate, what are the barriers to women within our professions? So I can talk about that. But also, I think that, that women need to, it's the same thing really as we're talking about with junior lawyers, but, they need self-belief, they need to advocate for themselves, they need to know their value, because I think very often, they're actually performing the position of a partner, and but they're not
Bold
putting
enough
themselves
to-
they're not
yeah,
putting
yeah,
themselves forward for that role. Yes, exactly. And I think I think women who are close to that are aspiring to those senior roles, they need to seek out again role models, but they also need to get themselves at the very least a mentor or a coach or a sponsor. And I think they need their own board of directors. I mean, we all need support to be able to succeed in work that is it's pretty challenging and full on. So your board of directors might be your line manager, might be your best friend, might be your cleaner, might be your childminder, anybody, but you need people who can support you and who you can turn to. So what have we done? So Irwin Mitchell.
Let's go back for a second.
Okay.
Are we saying top 3 tips for women who want to rise into senior positions? We're saying self-belief, mentorship, and sponsorship, right?
Self-belief, definitely. You're still going to need to work hard, and I think a mentorship. I think mentor, yes. But I also think you do need, whatever you're going to call it. I'm calling it a board of directors, but you need support. But you do also still need to raise your profile internally, externally, seek out those opportunities, speaking slots, doing podcasts, being invited to speak at conferences, taking yourself again into places that might feel a bit scary, but raising your profile.
Okay, that's great. I know Irwin Mitchell has done a lot of work in this area, and I know over 50% of your partners are actually women. This is a statistic that a lot of firms aspire to get to, but they struggle. So I know you were going to get into that, but what do you think these firms are missing, and what has been the key to Irwin Mitchell's success in this area?
Well, we ran a series of roundtables. I don't know when it will have been, maybe before the pandemic, 7, 8, 9 years ago. We ran a series of roundtables across our offices, looking at what women saw as the barriers to being in leadership roles. And there were no huge surprises. I think, flexible work, of course, nobody was working flexibly. Well, I mean, some people were, but not many people working flexibly. Unconscious bias, work allocation, sometimes for the most benign reasons, somebody will not give somebody who's just come back from maternity leave, for example, a job because they think, they need to be at home with their baby, whereas actually giving them that opportunity would enable them to excel, and that might help them with promotions. So we have to be wary of unconscious bias, lack of role models, sufficient number of role models in senior roles, and mentoring. So we looked at all of the feedback, and that informed our strategy. And so even before the pandemic, 43% of our colleagues were working flexibly.
That's almost unheard of.
Yeah, so
especially before the pandemic anyway. Now it's
and now we introduced flexible by choice after the pandemic, so really people can work when and how they want. We're looking at that now because, you can see that for some people, it's not great for their well-being to be at home the whole time. And it's really important to collaborate. And of course, you learn from, your junior lawyers are going to learn from their line managers who need to be in the office from time to time. So we're encouraging anchor days. So teams have anchor days at least one day a week. And we're encouraging people to come in at least 2 days a week now, but that's very much left to individual teams. So we're not mandating that across the business. So there's still a lot of flexibility in it. But it's interesting when you were asking me about, Irwin Mitchell and how far we've come, because, the reality with women in law is that most of women have only been able to practice law for just over 100 years, as you know, but most of the change for women has been in the last 30 years. Meanwhile, I've been practicing, although I've been practicing longer than that. I've been at Irwin Mitchell 30 years. But a lot of it is in the last 10 years. And I was in readiness for moving to our new premises, our new office. I was clearing out some papers recently, And I found an email in which we were talking about the fact that in 2013, so not that long ago, 12 years ago, 29% of our partners were women. 29%. And now it's 54%.
Yeah,
So
you've come a very long way.
We've come a long way, unlike other firms, in a short time. So I was the first office managing partner in 2012 across all our offices. I was the first one. Well, now we've got 23 offices now, and over 50% of our office managing partners are women. So the change has been, there's been a dramatic change. Yeah. But of course, when I went into law, 8% of solicitors were women, and now I think 60% of NQs are women.
Although about 30% are in senior positions. So
yes,
you're doing a lot better than...
Yeah. I mean, that's true. It's taking a while But 67% of our recent promotions to partnership were women.
That's amazing.
But we have 72% of our colleagues are women. So I think Irwin Mitchell is a very female-friendly place to work. Women like working at Irwin Mitchell. We've got family-friendly policies, and we are very flexible. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Well, if you're intentional about it, I guess you would see the results, is what I'm getting from that.
Well, that's right. That's where I started on that question. I think senior, the senior leadership team, they need to be committed to it, because it's not going to happen otherwise.
Yeah, agree. Well, it's been an amazing conversation so far. We're not done yet, but we're almost there. Just a few more questions. Knowing all you know now, if you were to start your legal career all over again in 2025, what would you do differently?
Do you know what I'm going to say to that question?
You're not going to go into law.
No. I would definitely go into law. I think law is a great profession. I would encourage anybody to go into law. Partly because there are so many aspects to it. There's so much to choose from. So you can find the right niche for you, and it's very rewarding. No, what I would do is I would spend more time with my children. I would I would be more present for my children. I do think and I say this to my own children, I think it's really important to show up for your children. But it's easy to say that now. Yeah. But at the time when I had young children, we didn't have, as I keep saying, we didn't have any IT. Nobody was talking about well-being. Nobody. It was just, so it was just the way it was. I mean, if you want to take work home, you couldn't really, because you'd have to take huge paper files on the tube with you. And I think I would learn to say no. I'm not very good at saying no, as I've already said.
Do you think it would have been possible to say no and still get to the level that you did?
Do you know, I think probably not, but I think now it might be. I think now, because there is so much more emphasis now on well-being and work-life balance, which we didn't talk about. So I think it probably would be possible to say no now. But when I say no, for me, that's I allow my diary to get crowded out. And, if I've got one evening 3 in the next 3 weeks, and it's a week Tuesday, and you say, have you got any time in the next 3 weeks? I'll say, yeah, actually, I've got a week Tuesday. Instead of thinking, I've got to keep that week Tuesday free because it's the only time I've got. So I'm just not good at saying no. But I do think it's a power. And I think people should say no and say it quickly. So to just say no and say it politely, and then just move on. But yeah.
Well, that flows nicely into my next question. You've had a lot of success. You mentioned you've got 5 kids. How do you balance your career, your work life, your personal life? Do you balance it all? Is it possible to manage it all? And what tips would you give to junior lawyers or mid-level lawyers who are trying to manage it all?
I think the thing is, if you love it, and I do really love what I do, it is hard because you find you just blend, work and home, particularly with the diversity stuff, because I just love it. So it's like a passion. So I'll be, investigating that at the weekends as well. But actually, if you've got a young family, then I think you really, you do need to have that balance, and I think it's more possible now for the reasons that I've just said, but certain things have always been important to me. It's family and friends, of course, always been important, and holidays have always been really precious for me. So when my kids were young, say when my kids were young, we used to go on holiday together. My kids still come on holiday with us as long as I'm paying.
Of course.
My kids, we spent a lot of time with our children, actually. We all live very near each other
What's your favourite
in London.
holiday destination?
Probably skiing, because it brings everybody together. So I love it. So when my children were young, we hadn't skied when we were young. We don't come from the sort of families that skied, that had the money to ski. I never went on holiday with my parents abroad. Anyway, we decided when the children were young that we would start skiing because the children would come on holiday with us. So we thought, when they're teenagers, they're not going to come on holiday unless we go on ski holiday. So we'd go skiing. And they're now way beyond that. And we still ski together. Not every year, but we ski together quite often. Holidays have always been really important. But I think obviously it is important to make time. It's all the obvious stuff, eat well, sleep well, go for walks, and don't endlessly scroll. That's the
TikTok is consuming.
What do I sometimes feel I've spent I'm not on TikTok.
Are you not?
No. I'm not going to start. I'm not on Facebook, but I find myself scrolling on LinkedIn and Instagram, and sometimes I think, how much time have I spent scrolling this week? I could have read War and Peace.
Honestly.
But I only do it. I do it when you're absolutely not meant to do it. I do it when I first wake up and before I go to bed. I don't do it in the day.
Before I go to bed, and I find that I've been hours on there and I've only got 1 hour left to sleep. Terrible habit. But what's next for Alison Eddy? What are you looking forward to in the future?
Well, I'm really loving what I'm doing at the moment. It's bringing real joy for me. But I'm also I'm co-leading our Female Voice. It's a women's-led initiative where we bring women together from across our networks to share stories and collaborate, inspire and celebrate women. And so it's just great fun. So I'm really enjoying that. But I'm going to be doing some work in India.
Wow. When?
Yeah. In September. I've already started. I love India. I've got a real passion for India. One of my children's married into an Indian family, and we've travelled in India a lot. And a friend of mine who has a career development, career coaching business, she suggested, why don't we do something in India together? We both love it. So I've been putting some feelers out with not-for-profits and businesses and law firms in India about what we could do. So at the moment, a couple of businesses that we're talking to and law firms, but we're definitely going to be working with, it's a project called the Ajama Project in Pune, and Magic Bus charity here in London, but all over India, and we're going to be working with them in Mumbai, two fantastic not-for-profits that, because they can provide financial support for students, it means they can keep girls out of marriage and in education. And so we're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. We've been talking about goal setting, resilience, confidence building, to help them in their careers. And then we're going to do some one-on-one or small group mentoring. So I'm really looking for that. But we did a pilot a couple of weeks ago with some of these they were all STEM students, and they were so inspiring. And I thought, I'm going to get far more out of this than they're going to get out of it. But I'm really looking forward to that.
Wow, that sounds amazing and incredibly impactful. Well, we wish you all the best of luck with that. I'll look forward to seeing that on your LinkedIn, hopefully, if you post and share that. But thank you so much for joining us here today. It's been inspiring, incredible, loads of things to take away. Any final words for our audience?
Go into law. It's a fantastic, it's a wonderful profession.
Agree. Thank you so much, Alison.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.